I'm French, so if you do not understand something, just tell me and we'll repeat. And my company is monitoring the Accumulo project since 2012, and we are using it in production since 2014. So it has been 4 years now. And I will try to showcase a project we have, which is about extracting facts from documents and storing them in a kind of fact database to then later be queried. So the plan for today is in 3 parts. So I will try to give you some context about the problem we are trying to solve. Then I will give you a brief overview of how these little components are wired together to get the result we want. And then we will talk about something that is at the heart of our system, which is ontology-mediated queries. And we will talk about something quite new, which is existential rules that allows you to assert the existence of unknown entities. So the context part. So at the beginning, we have some constraints. First, we need to be able to have, at the low level, some access rights, because all the data should not be accessible to everybody. And a very interesting thing about that is that you can have the same ontology for many people, but they will have different results according to their user rights, which... So the second part is that the platform must be easily extensible. And for that, we needed to have a way to structure the data in something normalized, so a bit like DataWave is doing. And the last part is because we are interested in extracting facts to build knowledge, we need to store graphs, because at the underlying, a fact database is a graph database. So we have a lot of collection of documents, and people that use them may not always know where do they come from and what is written inside this repository of data. So they must have some kind of way to query them and discover them as they go in their analytics. And an example is if we have an NGO dataset, we can be interested in basically 2 questions. Let's say, does a report mention a given keyword such as refugee? But another kind of question is what kind of events do the reports associate to refugee? So it seems to be the same question, but you cannot solve or answer them the same way. For the first one, it's pretty easy. You write your keywords, it gives you documents back, and you have the answer. But for the other one, you need to be able to describe what you are searching for, so you need a bit to know what you are searching for. Otherwise, you won't get any results. Or you will write refugee, and we get many results, and you have to read them all to try to find the different kind of event associated to it. So we talked at the previous Accumulo summits, there are a lot of talks about keyword search and how do we index data. So it solves part of the problem, but we found out that keyword selection is something very hard, and people are not very good at doing it, because what you want when we enter a new keyword is to cut as many documents as possible. And the other thing is that the keywords you enter may not be sufficiently discriminating, and it's particularly true in government databases where you have a lot of acronyms. And you need to understand what they mean, and the same meaning for the same acronym, you may have some little difference in understanding between 2 people of 2 services, so you need to account for that, which is false positives. And false negatives is for us when most of the search engine classify documents at the end, and they try to have a relevant score. But sometimes the number of time a keyword appears in the body of the document is not representative of the knowledge which is inside. So algorithms such as TF-IDF or BM25 does behave very poorly in this kind of situations. So our approach is to have an ontology between the database and the user, and these ontology are maintained by people that know the data stored. And so what the ontology provides is it helps the user formulate queries intuitively, because they can formulate in their domain of expertise and not in a generic way. And so the answer will, in the answer you will get both the data you need and the knowledge the people is putting in the ontological term he is using to get their results. So now I will try to show you some interface, some UI, and what we do with that. So the first one is the result of a search query. So the first interesting part, I think, is this one. So we find out that a lot of time you are as much interested in knowing that something exists as in knowing it by itself. So we have a custom low-level visibility label iterator where when you do not have the ACL, the good visibility labels, instead of just keeping it at the, do not passing it at the upper level of the stack of iterators, we just hash the value and pass the hash on top. And the, instead in French. The other interesting part is what we call duck queries. So basically, you have an escape term, which is for the bang. And then you know that after that, the search engine knows that they must apply an ontology on top of the result by keywords you have in the parentheses. So what it will do here is it will issue a query with give me all the documents you know that mention Daniel. And then enquête is in French, but we might have in an ontology we say that enquête might mean investigation in English and so on. So it will try to apply this knowledge to all the resulting documents and remove everything that is not linked to an investigation. And it could be interesting. I don't know if you know Cameo or Plover, which are ontology to describe international events, geopolitical events. And so it means that if you implement this ontology, you could issue queries such as give me all the documents that mention an aggressive poster. So it's a bit more high level, and the result may not contain any word of what you type in the search engine, in the search bar. The next thing is when you select a document and you open it, you can just extract data to put it in your knowledge graph, but on the right, we pre-populate things with what we call annotations. So we have a process that do some kind of NLP and extract things, and we put it all the things we extract for a given document on the right. And by default, if it's a machine that do it, we have a red color, and then a human need to validate it to say, okay, I agree with the machine and there is no error in the process. And when it's done, it goes to the knowledge graph that is shared by everybody. And then they can add their own annotation. And the last part is that we do not have expert informatician to do that. So the people we are in front of this kind of thing you cannot ask her to do some technical things. So we have some template queries where they only have to fill forms, sorry, and they apply it, and it will be played every, let's say, hour or every day. So now I will try to show you a bit the complete workflow from the collect of the document to the how they are stored in the database. So we use, sorry, it's not clear, but we use NiFi a lot, and we collect on the lowest level documents. So there might be a very large number of types. It can be images, Word documents, Microsoft Excel, and so on. A question?
No, sorry, it's Tika, right?
Yes, because we have Tika and Tesseract that play together to extract text from image or from page from PDF document or so on. And then when we have everything, we can call a translation service such as Systran, and then we can apply NLP anywhere like Basis or anything else or custom made things. And at the end, we get an enriched JSON document. So I will show it a bit later. So for now, it's this. So the next stage is we take all these JSON documents and we put them in the database. So we have there is here only the MapReduce way to do things, but we have another one way, which is the one we use nearly always, which is we have a dedicated server with a large ring buffer, and we have a process that burns CPU cycle to turn in this ring buffer, and each socket of the computer, the server, is linked to the ring buffer. So you can say that socket 8081 is for a kind of data set, and each time you write inside, it will be written in the ring buffer, and the next time the process passes, it will take the data from it and write it. So you have a non-locking ingestion process. And we use something called the disruptor to do that. Which is based on technology used in matching engines for stock exchange. So now I will come back to the document we have. So we have an opinion about how they must be structured, and we have three kinds of fields. The first kind is fields with structure, such as metadata. It could be the name of the author, it could be the last time it was modified, it could be a lot of other things, custom things. The other field could be text field without structure. So maybe it would be the content of the document. Or if it's an Excel file, it will be an array with as many rows as you have in the Excel file, and each row is an array by itself, and so on. And we will serialize it later. And we will index this part later. And the last type of fields are text field with structure, which is facts we extracted from the text, and we have a meaning by themselves, such as locations, date, persons, duration, and so on, and that will be indexed their own way in a graph and not in a standard and indexed for terms. So when we have that, what we do, we flatten the JSON structure, and to get a triple that is a predicate, the subject, which is for us the ID of the document, and an object, which is the value we have in the JSON object. And there is a bit a mistake here, because our IDs are not UIDs. It's 3 random letters at the beginning, and then the timestamp of the moment it was indexed. We got it. So this way, it's very easy for us to say we want everything that has been ingested the last 24 hours. because we can issue 4,000 range queries across all tablet servers, and we get everything back. So when we have that, the last part is how do we store it at the lowest level? And we have something which is a bit a mix between Raya and GraphBLAS, or D4M. I don't exactly know what is D4M and what is GraphBLAS. Okay. So on the left, you have the table from the Raya, and on the right, their correspondence in D4M. And the difference there is that in D4M, you have your predicate and then the value. So if you want to do autocomplete, you need to specify in which kind of dimension you need to access. So what we did is we reversed both of them to be able to do some kind of autocompletes. The column family, we do not use them, or if we use them, is to specify the source of the data. So it could be a sensor, it could be anything. And the value will be the number of occurrence of the column qualifier in the row. And for OPD, which is a degree table, we just write one entry for each document. So we can know compute TF, EDF very fast because we have everything we know for a given query. And there is an additional table here that is a metadata table that will contain some cardinality estimation, the list of VZT labels, because we generate them on the fly using the path of the JSON, and we prefix it with the dataset. So we do not have to manage how we will write the visibility level. It's automatically made, and then a human can decide to add it or not to somebody. And there is a small thing that we are thinking about right now. We have a proof of concept, but it's not in production, which is because we can have very deeply nested JSON documents, such as documents from Shodan or this kind of thing. We cannot spend our time writing very large predicate to define what we are. So we store in the metadata table a numeric value associated to this path. And in all the other tables, we don't store this path, we store the numeric value. So we have very short predicate or dimension. So this is the classic way to query a triple store. And there is the PSO table may not be very interesting to query terms, but a bit later, we will come back to it because it allows us to be effective when we query an ontology. Because in an ontology, you always have a predicate, so we will just directly go to this table to do those things. And yes, I didn't know, but I didn't say, but query planning is made with the OPD table and word completion tool. Yeah. So when it's very special because we use the GraphBLAS 2-tab mult to perform some kind of on-queries, and we do it when both nodes are balanced and both nodes yield a lot of results. So what we find is that adding a small seeking filter between the two-tab iterators and remote source iterators and so on, we can speed up things a lot because when we write in the OPD table, we store not only the degree, but we store the min document ID and the max document ID. So now we can, when we have a query, we can say, okay, what is the min document ID, what is the max document ID, and if we push them to the seeking filter, we can jump ahead in the sequence when we process things. And we do some other things too when we have very low cardinality. on a couple predicate and a term, we store directly all the document ID in the OPD table, so we can just grab them on the fly. And when the last part is when the nodes are not balanced in terms of the size of the result set. If we have, let's say, less than 1 million on one side and more than 1 million on the other, we traverse the 1 million side, we build a Bloom filter with the ID, and we push the Bloom filter to the other one to only get what we need. So now I will come back to ontologies. So why adding an ontology on top of that? So it gives you more power of expression for the queries. It allows you to create new facts on the fly, and it gives you an unified view on multiple sources. And then you can have some kind of automated reasoning on top of your data. So I have now an example of what is to try to make you feel what is the difference between data log and existential rules. So if we have this fact database, we have 2 people in it. We have a date, and we have a notion of people being in a meeting at a given date. So what we do is we write a rule that say a person 1 has a meeting with at a given date. So we say that at the meeting is you need to find somebody who was in a meeting, and the first attribute must be a person, and the second one must be a date. So if we execute this one, does Cyril have a meeting? And the answer here is yes, because we can find a fact which is was a meeting, Cyril, and a date. And all the criteria are answered, and you get an answer. But here, it's a bit more complicated, because if we execute the same query, it will say, OK, I find that Pierre was in a meeting. I'd find that there is a person, Pierre, somewhere in my database, but I don't find the date. So now the data log will just say, OK, no, nobody named Pierre at the meeting. So what we use is a framework called Graal. And what Graal does is it gives you the ability to assert the existence of unknown entities, but basically what it does is it allows value creations. So you won't be able to resolve it, but it will say, OK, it should exist. And basically what Graal does is allow you to rewrite some kind of queries as an answer and an union of conjunctive queries. So then we can chain many matrix multiplied to answer the result. And so if we come back to our example, we can so create a new existential rule that say a people X was in a meeting implies that you must have a date associated with this meeting, which is pretty common. So now when you execute that, because you have this existential condition, it will create on the fly the missing value, and it will allow you to answer the question. So in this case, for Cyril, it will give the same answer as the previous as data log. But for this one, it will say, OK, yes, I know that Pierre had a meeting. I cannot tell you which date, but I know that it had a meeting. So just, if you have question. Oh, yes. Yes, sure. We have a Boolean tree with basically we have AND, OR, and AND NOT. And it's just, I think the biggest data set we have is about 150 terabytes of data. It's of raw data. It's not the size of the cluster, but it's the entry. and it works pretty well. But maybe I can add some detail because, as you know, the Bloom filter, there is a false positive. So what happened in truth is that when we take the first query, we write at the same time back the result in some kind of cache. Then we push the Bloom filter to the other side of the Boolean, the operator. And then we will write everything that goes through the Bloom filter and write it back to the same cache. Now, because Accumulo sorts everything in the right order, when we traverse back this set, we need to have 2 times the same ID to consider that we have a match. For us, it's because we do not want to spend our time with ETL process. And so because all this matrix multiply give you a data which is in the same structure in outside that in entry, so you can just call it again and again on the same group of tables. Okay, thank you.